Our scripture reading this morning is from the 5th chapter of Matthew. You are the salt of the earth, but what if salt were to lose its flavor? How could you restore it? It would be fit for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. You don't build a city on a hill, then try to hide it, do you? You don't light a lamp and then put a bushel basket over it, do you? No, you set it on a stand where it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, your light must shine before others so that they may see your good acts and give praise to God in heaven. Ancient words for our present day consideration.
They were censoring me. And you look like that's a good idea. Yeah. Welcome. Thank y'all for being here today. I'm so excited about the program that Social Justice is launching today because the church has like a 2,000-year history of anti-Semitism. So the issue in Gaza has been really tender issue for people to talk about and think about. And they have crafted the most perfect support for Palestinians, letting people understand the trauma that people are going through there, and not getting rerouted into something that then becomes just a fight. I think this is going to be really helpful for other churches and stuff to focus on love that seeks out justice. I think it's going to give this thing a power. And they have a quote by Bishop Tutu, who knows quite a bit about the struggle. But unpopular causes are different, especially if you live in Texas. You just have to remember your audience. And I think this thing is going to really be helpful to a lot of people, looking past the dilemma and seeing the reality of what it's like for people in Gaza. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. We're going through the Sermon on the Mount. We just spent 8 weeks on the Beatitudes. And for me, this is like home base. I think people are feeling a little more hope now than they were feeling when I started the series. A certain presidential election was looking really bad. But what we're trying to do is get to the roots of the love that grows into justice. Right? We don't have to hate anybody. We just have to stand up for people that are being oppressed. And not getting lost in the storm is very helpful. And for me, Sermon on the Mount is square one. That's why I'm a Christian. Apostles' Creed, not so much. When the Christian message got to Europe, it was reframed. It became patriarchal, it became hierarchical, it became dogmatic. And what we're going to experience as we go through the Sermon on the Mount is that's the opposite of what Jesus taught. That we're going to kind of find our own roots, I hope, as we go through these words. What's amazing to me, this is the first sermon that Jesus gives according to Matthew. And the things that he doesn't say are really stunning. He doesn't say, I've come to start a franchise that I call the church. I want you to meet on Sundays and just sit there and flatter me for an hour. He forgot to mention the church. The church, particularly the hierarchical church, the dogmatic church, developed hundreds of years after Jesus is gone. We're getting to our foundation and to our roots here. And it's a much more radical religion than the type of Christianity that sides with Christian nationalists and bullies. He also didn't say, I need to tell you that you're all sinners. Maybe you haven't done anything, but your great grandparents in the Garden of Eden stole some fruit. And of course, God's punishing you. That's just what you do. When one person commits a crime, you punish the entire group. If somebody steals something in a city, you poison the water supply. That way you make sure, and God had to create diabetes and cancer and all these ways to punish everybody for what two people did. Doesn't that make sense? That's desperation theology. That's when you have a system that isn't really working, and you got to try to drum up things. The only way you scare people so that something like that seems to make sense. He also didn't say it's okay to sell your soul to the NRA, but what I want you to do is put the 10 Commandments on school walls. So when there are school shootings, as there inevitably going to be, when you have military-grade weapons loose in the general population, then they can look and know to whom to send the thoughts and prayers. That's not what Jesus taught, and so I don't personally consider it Christian, just because it has the label. If it doesn't jive with the Sermon on the Mount, it's okay. You choose whatever you want, but please leave Jesus out of it. Don't use Jesus to steal other people's votes. Don't use Jesus to say why the naked shouldn't be clothed and the hungry shouldn't be fed. That kind of bothers me. And what Jesus said, these are the first words. He's talked about the Beatitudes, but now he says, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. That's amazing. What I was taught is that I was sinful, I was made imperfect, and then I need to do all these things, and then Jesus would win my forgiveness by bleeding. I want to look at this passage that we just read. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And realize these are the first words Jesus is saying to followers, to anyone that would follow him. Not, I am the light of the world. You are the light of the world. You sitting there are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. Now, what he didn't do is pass out the Apostles' Creed and say, I want you to memorize this stuff. And if you wind up being a ghetto owner and exploiting your workers, just say this once a week at my church, and we're hunky-dory. Jesus didn't seem to think like that. And I would say that what the Sermon on the Mount implies to me is that Jesus wasn't interested in teaching people dogma. He was interested in helping them come to awareness, to awakening. Now that's a very different religion, isn't it? To teach you what to think is thievery. To teach children what to think, to place a scar in their brain so they can't come to certain conclusions about life. They're afraid to be honest. Because what they're taught in Sunday school is that if you're too scientific, it's going to lead you away from Jesus. In the ancient world, in many places, when they talked about darkness and light, they weren't saying light is good, darkness is bad. Darkness was a symbol for the material world, and light was a symbol for human consciousness. Human consciousness comes out of the material world. That's a very modern viewpoint. But a lot of ancient people understood that. And it's not that one is good, one is bad. The light shines out of the darkness. Your body is important. But who you are comes from a very deep place. From a scientific viewpoint, as I've said so many times, You are the universe that's come to consciousness. And I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm saying go into your own experience and say, where the heck is this consciousness coming from? And just stay with that question until you feel like you found a resting place. The original Christianity, in my opinion, was mystical. It was radical politically. It challenged empire. But it started with, it didn't even start with love, it started with awareness. When Jesus said, those who have ears to hear, let them hear. It's not really about physical listening. But like Paul Tillich said, love begins when we listen. So when you don't know where else to begin, listen tenderly and see what happens. The best version of Christian mysticism that I know are the Quakers or the Society of Friends. There's a lot of mystical stuff in the Middle Ages, but a lot of those are very neurotic people. A lot about pain, suffering, bleeding, all that kind of stuff. But the Quakers talk about things that sound like the Sermon on the Mount, which may be why they're not that popular. They actually do this stuff. In the Quaker tradition, they believe that this inner light is in every one of us. They believe that light is there in every person we meet, that we have to learn to see by listening and looking more closely, that it's there. And listen to this in the context of this idea of the light shining out of the darkness. This is written 1670 by Isaac Pennington. It is not enough to hear of Christ or read of Christ, but this is the thing, to feel Christ to be my root, my life, and my foundation. It's very important to take the male out of the risen Christ. If our ideas of the sacred are masculine, we're going to lose the sense of that we're being birthed, that we're emanating, that we're radiating out of something that's more basic within us. I mean, guys, we bring a lot to the game. But if God is male, then we're made like pots. We're made like machines. If the sacred births us, then we're emanating, we're shining out of this depth. When Jesus talked about the parent that is in heaven, I think that he was talking about our source, whatever that is. And you don't really need to know what it is. You just need to know that you're coming out of this depth. And whatever death is, it's returning to that. That's the only thing I know that gets rid of that panicked fear of loss and death. To remember who you are, what you're shining out of. When Jesus said, I am the way, I'm the path, I'm the light, I believe he's talking as your source, as the depths within you. I don't think he's speaking as an outsider. There was a form of poetry in the ancient world where somebody would speak it and say, I am this, I am that, but we're all that. We all emanate from this creative source. So following Jesus is a lot more than joining a church. You know, Jesus didn't even teach people how to spell Presbyterian. He didn't warn you that everybody's going to think you're Episcopals because they couldn't tell the difference in the words. Jesus did not come, in my opinion, to teach belief. He came to open us to awareness. He wasn't coming because he's the offspring of the source, but because we are. And he knew that, and he wanted to share that, what a gift that is. So that's the first thing I get from this, you are the light of the world. The second thing is, Jesus didn't start his sermon. Remember, this is the beginning. They don't know him. He's preaching the first sermon, and he doesn't say, I have to tell you, you're all sinners, and I want you to change who you are. That was his chance to say, I'm your Savior. All I'm asking is that you grovel to me, and then I'll let myself be cut up in all of that. I don't think Jesus was coming to teach us to be moralistic. He was coming to teach us to be authentic, to be who we truly are. When he said, you are the salt of the earth, if salt loses its flavor, then it's useless. He's talking to people. So saltiness is kind of a quality. He's saying that you bring qualities to the world because of who you are as a human being. And your frailties and your flaws are as important to the beauty as your strengths. Have you ever had anybody who is, a very flawed person, but that made them even more beautiful? It's really all of us, if you think about it. The saltiness is a quality. I think Jesus is saying, don't let religion rob you of who you are. Don't let religion put a mask on you and have you pretending that you believe things or that you feel things. If you love somebody that the world doesn't approve of, don't listen to people who don't know who you are. You have your own song to sing. You bring a gift to the world because of who you are. So the second thing I get from this passage is I don't think Jesus is asking us to be moralists. I think he's asking us to be authentic. And the final thing I get from the passage is when he talks about putting the flame up high and everybody can see it. Again, the idea of glorifying God, in Greek, the word to glorify means to shine. It says that the hair is the glory of women, but, and it's anybody with long hair. The Beatles. Fabian, who's the guy? Yeah. Fabio. That's it. Has it been a while since you thought of Fabio? My brain does weird things when I'm preaching, so. Yeah, I'm more horrified than anybody. But it means you are emanating from something. And we may not be able to figure out what that is, but we can trust it. We're coming out of it, we're emanating of it. It's the creative principle of our being. It's deeper in us than our body and ourself. And I think he's saying that's everywhere. When he says lifting the candle up so everybody in the house can see it, I think he's saying, I'm not coming to start a sectarian religion. Sectarian Christianity has done as much evil as it has done good. That's not what Jesus taught. I think churches are intimate communities, but we have to serve the common good. We have to look beyond ourselves and serve the whole. When the early church talked about coming to Christ, I think they were talking about a mystical experience of realizing their interconnectedness to all beings. I think that Jesus was the person that they had known, and the Christ represented interconnectedness, the full manifestation of humanity, everything that's possible. There's a story in Hinduism that I've always liked. Chase tried to find the author, but I think it may be somebody named Ramakrishna, who introduced Hinduism to the West for a lot of people. But there's other versions of this story. And the point of the story is when the ego looks for God, it thinks it's really trying to find God, but it really is not wanting to find God, because the ego has to dissolve when it meets universal love, and it doesn't want to do that. It gets afraid. So in this story, a salt doll is looking for the ocean. It thinks it wants to find the ocean, but it really doesn't. So it gets up to the ocean, and somebody says, do you know who the ocean is? And the salt doll says, no. So the person says, well, put your hand in there. Salt doll puts the hand in, comes back without fingers, right, dissolving into the ocean. Puts the foot in, comes back without toes. And then the teacher says, do you know who the ocean is now? And the salt doll says, I am that. Which in Hinduism is one of the punchlines. You are that you're looking for. You're emanating out of that you think doesn't know you're even here. You're begging for favors from the creative source of your own being. The church should make us a home in the universe, not just here. A church that only baptizes you into itself has robbed you. A church that teaches you to join a gated community that's too pure to be with the outsiders is the very thing that Jesus is trying to save us from. I don't think Jesus came as much to save us from sin as from a religion. Because I think the sin that Jesus is talking about is oppression, cruelty. If the goal is love, then cruelty is the worst heresy of all. So, anyway, this was the first sermon that Jesus preached, according to Matthew. Think about how strange it is that he didn't talk about any of the things you were taught in Sunday school or in catechism class, or probably in seminary if you went that far. And I think that's because Jesus was trying to teach awareness, not belief, authenticity, authentic living, as opposed to pretending to be moralistic. And then finally, a love that grows to embrace all beings, a love that is radical and universal. I want to close just with the passage. See if the passage touches you like it touches me. You don't even know this guy. You show up for a rabbi who's preaching. And he says, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. In other words, don't let religion rob you of who you are. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. That's what sectarian religion is. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light so shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify our sacred source. Well, this is my struggle with the passage. We'll take a moment now for you to think about how you would have preached it.